Yo, what's up, you guys? I am back, and Azazin has another question posted in the Discord. Again, this is the Creative Block Live Help session. He wants to know, how can I make a random loadout every round? All right, so let's go through a really quick and easy setup on how to do that. I'm going to show you guys how to do that with a single player, and then I'll show you what to add to do it for a multiplayer. So let me go ahead and let them know. And let's go ahead and run through the setup. Now for single player, it's fairly simple. You won't need a mutator zone. We won't bring that in until we have our setup for the multiplayer. But for this setup, you're going to need a timer to let the players know that the game is loading, a random number generator, triggers, teleporters, and item granters. This setup will show you how to randomize teleports as well as randomize loadouts for each round as well. So an important thing to note about the setup is island settings, in which we have it set to the number of rounds that we need, which is going to be 3 rounds. And the time is set down to 1 minute. However, I'm going to be ending the round with a end game device so that we can speed things along. Okay, so before I show you the settings, of course, let's see how it plays, and you guys can see how this works. All right, player spawns into the game, and you see the RNG device starts right away, and player is spawned with their loadout. We have uncommon here for the first round, and depending on what section they are, they'll be spawning here. So let's go ahead and end the round. Keep in mind, it is randomized. It is possible they can go to the same section for the next round with the same loadout. It all depends on where that number lands or where the RNG device lands. So let's see what happens on the second round. And we're back to 1. All right, cool. And last round, we're on round 3, which we have completely different loadout. All right, let's go ahead and end game. And let's do one more set. See if we get a 2 in there. Let's see what happens. One again. Three. Cool. and 3 again. All right, so you see it is randomized. We didn't get 2 this time, but we might get it next time. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the game and show you the settings. And then after I show you the settings, I'm gonna show you what you need to add to make it multiplayer. And by that, I mean you have a pre-game lobby, you have more than one player that needs to teleport to the same area. So I'm gonna show you how to add a mutator zone to the setup that will allow you to teleport and provide more than one player all their loot and take them to a different area. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and jump to the settings. Yeah. All right, cool. All right, so of course you know you're going to need your spawner pads, but that's not what this tutorial is about. We're going to be focusing on the RNG device, the triggers, and the teleporters. In fact, since everything's binded, once you bind it to the trigger, you won't really need to bind it to the teleporters. But I'll show you guys everything just so you have the rundown. So let's first start with the timer. I'm using this timer just for display purposes only because they both begin at game start. What you'll notice is the timer is set to 3 seconds, but the RNG device is set to 1 second off, or after 3 seconds. So 4 seconds for this, 3 seconds for this. This gives it time to teleport and grant the weapons and gives it a small buffer between devices. So let me go ahead and show you the timer device. Welcome back, Choi. Nice, I do hope you have a good one. And you see this is not binded to anything in functions and not binded to anything in events. Again, just for display purposes, it's the first thing you see when the game starts and lets the players know that, hey, the game is about to start. Now let's take a look at the settings for the random number generator, or famously known as the RNG device. I have 3 options, 3 rounds, and I need 3 different loadouts. So the value limit is set to, the value limit 2 is set to 3. If I had 4 loadouts or 4 different areas, I'll put 4 here and so forth. Okay? You have a good one too, dude. Thanks for coming through. And you can see this is activate on phase game start. No functions. And we have a fail clause here if it rolls the number and it doesn't roll anything. On lose, we're going to send an event to trigger losing draw and to trigger that device. So let's take a look at that before we jump into the winning selections. So this is just in case it will grant something if it doesn't roll a number or the system results in a loss. And for functions, this should already be binded. Trigger when receiving from random number generator on lose. And on triggered, we're going to grant them the items from item granter 4 and teleport to teleporter 3, which is set in section 3. And this is item granter 4. and enable when the player spawns into the game. And this is player spawner, which is assigned to team 1, which is most likely going to be the first player that spawns into the game. They're always assigned to team 1. So that's going to be there. All right, so now that is that trigger. Now let's take a look at the triggers that are within the RNG device. So this is for trigger loot 1. And you'll see some similarities here, but I'll go through them all. Yo, glad to hear that, dude. I see Bago says, just followed. Thanks for making that server. I have learned a lot in just a few hours compared to just research on YouTube or the official Fortnite server, our UEFN server. Dude, that's so great to hear. I'm glad that there's so much information there. I know how hard it is to find information and get started. So I really appreciate that it helps you. That's great. We have here on triggered, we're going to send an event to the item granter to grant the item, and teleporter 1 to teleport. This is the item granter for loot 1, and let's check it out. Again, you can see it's the same settings as the one we saw prior, with the exception of grant item when receiving from trigger loot 1 on triggered, and no events. All right, this is for loot 2. Untriggered, send to item granter 2 to grant items, and teleporter 2 to teleport. Again, this is for single player random loot teleport if you have a single player game. After this, I'm going to show you guys how to set up for multiplayer. So let's take a look at item granter 2 for loot 2. And you can see they are all the same with the exception of where the events are sent or received. So for functions, of course, enable when player spawns into the game. Again, that's assigned to the first player spawner in the game, assigned to team 1, and grant item when receiving from trigger loot 2 on triggered. And then the last one, trigger 3 for loot 3. And on triggered, go to item granter 3 for loot 3 and teleporter 3 to teleport. And here is item granter 3. And grant item when receiving from trigger 3 on triggered, and And there you go. So that is that. Now the teleporter should already be linked up. And you should see here when you go to functions, teleport and receive from trigger 1 for loot 1, no events. These are the options and the settings for those options here for the teleporter. Of course, if you're using specific classes or teams, this is where you'll place that here, which will be select the team or select the class. Since I have anyone can go to this teleporter for this round, I have it set to all and select the class of any. Let's see, let's face the player in teleporter direction. That's fine. No skydive after teleport. And then teleporter 2 is practically the same. And if you want to face them in the direction, you can set that to yes. And this should be binded to trigger loot 2 or level 2, whatever you would like to call it, and so forth, right? And then this is, of course, connected to trigger 3 with, again, the same, practically the same options. Trigger 3. And then also this is assigning to the losing draw trigger on triggered. So if the draw loses, it'll still transfer to level 3. So if you have, let's say, a specific round for the losing round, let's say it's like level 5 or something, then of course you'll set that trigger to level 5. Now that's for using a single player. And now you guys see all the settings required to do that. Now what if you have multiple players, right? You have multiple players. And let's go ahead and make a separate, set that to any. This is team 1, right? And you have, you know, just like a load full of players that are spawning here, and so forth. Then what you'll need is a mutator zone that will enable and disable depending on which trigger is selected, right? So let's go ahead and set that up, and I can show you how that works. So let's see, I have one mutator zone here, and I'm going to call that L1. And let me make sure nothing is binded to it. All right, great. And then I want to set it to enable on phase none, right? So I need 4 because I have a losing draw 1. So to see here, level 2. Level 3. And I'll just call this losing draw. All right, so that makes my 4th one. So what I need to do is remove all the teleporter connections to this since we're not using single player anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and say delete. You know, like in Death Note, delete. Let's see here, delete. Make sure it's registered. Sometimes you have to go back and check. Sometimes you might delete something in 1.0 or even in UEFN when you're event binding, and you'll go back and it still says that it's there. So make sure you check to make sure it's gone, right? And then of course delete. Instead, we're going to assign it to the mutator zones, right? So this is going to be untriggered mute zone. L1, enable. L2, enable. And this should be L3, enable. Make sure that's there. All right, cool. All right. I'm just gonna trust the process. Let me just, you know what? Let me just check. All right, we're good. All right, cool. Now let's go ahead and put this on the losing draw. And we can search for this quite fast. There we go. Enable. Okay, once that's there, now we can add the teleport to where we want them to go, to the mutator zone. So let's see here. On player entering zone, we're going to do teleport. One, teleport. On entering zone, teleport 2. And on entering zone, teleport 3, right? And then for the losing draw, let's just select any one, it doesn't matter. We can do, again, teleport 3. Because I didn't add a second or a fourth zone teleport, right? So we just take them back to 3, but they'll get a whole completely different loop. Now that that is set up, we have them all set on none. That means that when the game starts, these will not be active in any way, and they should not be active. If you ever come across a situation in which you have these set up and you have it set to none and they are active when they're set to none, double check your mechanics, and on top of that, make sure that your mechanics are right. I can probably make this just a little bit bigger. Yeah, that's not bad. Make sure your mechanics are right, and if they are right and it's still enabled when the game starts and you have it set to enabled on phase none, could be a bug. You can then try something else like a channel device or an alternative, player reference devices, all that stuff. You can definitely run tests to see if that would work better for that particular situation. All right, so as long as all players are within the zone, we should be good to go, and we should only have 4 here. And that looks splendid, and so forth. Another important thing to note, you want to make sure that the zone is not too high meaning that if the player's legs or arms stick out the zone, like, you know, that kind of thing, or if you place the zone and it's like only like this, you see how the player's legs are still kind of outside the zone. You don't really want that. That can cause some issues. At least I experienced some. You want to make sure it is fully touching the ground and engulfing the player. Okay, so be sure that is included. Now, when the RNG picks a trigger, it's going to enable a specific zone that should teleport the player and grant them the items. Let's go ahead and give that a test. All right, it is selecting the same area, but that happens. We only have 3. Let's see what happens for round 3. Also, you want to make sure that your mutator zones are set to not visible. I didn't quite do that, but make sure you do that as well. Let's do one more round and see where we end up. Or one more set. All right, we got 3 first. Cool. All right, there you go. Now you guys know how to set it up for single player, and you know how to set up for multiplayer by the use of mutator zones. I do hope this brief tutorial helps you when you're working with random loot and random locations, and you're able to take this tutorial and build upon it and create really cool games. And on that, I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for joining up. Bye.